My brothers and my sisters, my name is Brother Shimmy, and I'm happy to be your guest tonight. We were supposed to have started this an hour ago. Well, I'm very far. I'm out there in the field there, rendering some essential services, and we don't know, but something happened, but we here. And let's talk for the next 30 minutes about this lockdown and the implications on the church. And let us just try to find a way around it. You see, church is an extension of the ministry of Jesus Christ. Church is not a non-governmental organization. Church does not exist to augment government services. Church does not exist to pass out parcels in times of crisis. Church was founded by Christ. A few months ago, 2 months ago, we had the opportunity to talk to the South African Parliament and the COGTA committee, and the discussion was the regulation of religion. And we made a statement there that the state can never force us to redefine what church is, because church does not exist at the pleasure of the state. We can never let government redefine who we are and redefine our mission. And as a result of that, we can never let church be driven by the consensus that exists between church and government. Church is under obligation to obey governments only as far as any instruction given by government is not in contravention with the mandate and the commission Jesus gave us. And that is why it's inevitable. It's completely inevitable that in the execution of its God-given purpose, the church will always lock horns with earthly governments. Now, many of you think it's a good thing that church and government have an understanding. But it's a lopsided understanding. Every time church and the government have an understanding, it's a lopsided understanding. It's an understanding based not on government's compromise, but an understanding based on the church's compromise of its mission, its mandate, its commission. Therefore, for us to constantly take a cue from government regarding what we should be doing, it's a snare. The church has been striving over the last almost 2 millennia, 1,900 years, under persecution, under trials, under tribulations. And the only time recorded in history where the church's conscience was compromised and his light dimmed are those periods where the church was in bed with earthly governments. The church was fiercely persecuted at the beginning of the age, and about the year 300 or so, a Roman emperor rose, Constantine, and he offered church a partnership that the scriptures did not foretell in a good way. Now, when the scripture looked ahead and told us about the end-time relations between any form of church and human government, it spoke about a compromised, a lukewarm, a church merely left with reputation, but no power. So Constantine was the first Italian emperor or Roman emperor to offer the church non-governmental status to the church in, exempted the church from taxes, paid preachers. And beyond that point, the church had to obey its master. And now its master was no longer God but money. And Christ had warned that a church hungry for conveniences would soon despise God. And that's exactly what happened. Church went into bed with a Roman emperor who protected it from what church grows from. Please follow me, lest we lose each other. The church thrives on persecution. The church thrives on trials and temptations and persecutions and not temptations, tribulations. Now, those of you who understand science, there's a process called photosynthesis, which is the greening of plants, which gives life, which gives plant life. And we are told from the phase moment I have of school, we're told that photosynthesis needs air and needs sunlight. And I think some water, if I'm not mistaken. And those three components are important to the growth, the development, and the fruitfulness of every plant. Now, I'm here to tell you that if you remove persecutions and trials and temptations, the church cannot be photosynthesized. Right? You are removing important ingredients. Church grows on. Now, that is why every time church considers what earthly governments say ahead of what God says, that church is compromised and that church loses its fire. Now, how does this relate to what you're talking about now? I'm going to be raising a few issues here. There was a time 2 months ago when this virus was declared a pandemic in South Africa, and the president came out with a national state of disaster, and society was kept away. We call it a lockdown. It gave sense. The church ministers to the people. If the people are indoors, who are you ministering to out there? That could be debatable, because doctors, nurses, soldiers, police, all the caregivers out there, they need spiritual support. And that is why if you look deeply, and they won't tell you that, they did not suspend the SAPS and SANDF chaplaincy. They did not. It's very ironic that when church was shut down because there was no society there, the part of the church that cared for the law enforcers was allowed to function. That's rational. That's good sense. Because as long as there is the soul out there, that soul needs spiritual discipleship, comfort, encouragement. It gave a lot of sense. Now, I have a friend in the SANDF, and I have some few friends in the SAPS. And when the church was when the community was quarantined or quarantined, however you pronounce it, but the armed forces went out there. They went out with their chaplains. It's the same thing. Chaplains go where soldiers go, because chaplains offer a service psychologists and therapists cannot, because human beings are spirits in bodies. We are not bodies with spirits. And there are faculties human beings possess. Their psycho-emotional faculty, which is known as the soul. Now, a psychologist can only minister to the woman's psyche. And to some extent, when you change your mind, you change how you feel about things. So they can only minister to the mind, but a psychologist has no capacity to minister to the body and to the spirit. Whereas a medical doctor can minister, a psychiatrist for that matter, can minister to the body. Psychiatrists are doctors. It's an arm of medical science, but psychology is not. Psychology is an arm of behavioral sciences, not natural sciences, not medical science. A psychiatrist can deal with brain issues, mind issues rather, because brain issues are neurologists. Mind issues to the extent that Even the imbalances in the body, they can administrate drugs for. And a medical doctor can only touch your body. But a medical doctor and a psychiatrist cannot give you a psychological support. Only a psychologist can do that. But a psychologist and a medical doctor who can deal with your mind and your body can never deal with your spirit. Only a preacher of the gospel can. So it gives sense that when they deploy soldiers and they deploy the police and they deploy all these people, they deploy them, even though soldiers have access to psychologists, psychiatrists, and medical doctors in the army. There's a military hospital, but there is the chaplaincy because there is an acknowledgement that whatever anyone's belief system is, be they Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever that behavior, the belief system is, they need their spirits taken care of. So we stayed indoors because it was sensible to stay indoors because we recognized that there was no one out there to minister to. The police and the armed forces, they were ministered to by the chaplaincy. And what would we be doing because all our people are locked outside? That's why we sat in our lounges. And the best we could do to meet a portion of society, the society that ministered to, was to set up social media platforms. But you should understand that those social media platforms cannot reach every South African because one, not every South African has access to the internet, and two, where even if they have access to the internet, not every South African has data. That is why when you use TV and you use radio and you use the internet, you reach only a portion of society. That means basically, our people have been sitting out there without the spiritual support necessary to sustain them, especially considering the extent and the levels of anxiety, of hopelessness, of helplessness, and all sides of kinds of concerns. That was a major sacrifice because whereas the people were safe physically, the people were lacking spiritually. But we kept indoors because understanding was, who would we minister to out there? Now, we could not minister to those who were cheating. Because let's be honest with one another. Footage after footage after footage indicate that there has been no lockdown in townships. The malls are brimming to the overflowing, teeming with people who come there to shop. The streets. I'm one of those model citizens who stayed indoors for 37 uninterrupted days. Not like I didn't even step out of my front yard because I kept the law. A preacher of the gospel must keep the law. I didn't even go to check my dustbin, and I just sent those who were doing essential services. Two of our kids are into essential services, so they took out the dustbin, brought it in. I only left my home in Joburg because that's where we were quarantined for 3 weeks, hoping that it would be over. I left my home in Joburg for Bloemfontein when they said we should go back home, and I took that opportunity before returning to work. I understood. I sat home because it gave sense that we sit home. But then we began to see pockets of society open. In a country where no less than 48 million citizens claim to be Christian, 78% according to the last census. Out of every 100 people you meet in the street, 78 of them are Christian. I want that to sink in. Out of every 100 people, out of every 1,000 people you see out there, 780 are Christian in South Africa. So when you open society to go public, you are creating opportunity and need for church to go public to the extent that you have opened up society. Because don't forget, religious rights, even though they can be limited by virtue of Section 36 of the Constitution, the limitation should be reasonable, it should be justifiable. should be rational. So we ask ourselves right now, what is the rationale of letting pockets of society go public? Is it still rational? Is it still justified? Because don't forget, nurses, doctors, radiographers, psychologists, psychiatrists. We have psychiatrists and psychologists in our churches. Army generals, lieutenants, now miners, now vendors. You know, or vendor and miner mean many things. Not like the ethnic group vendors. Vendors, people who sell. Miners, people who bring gold and other precious stones to the surface. They are out there, and they profess Christ. And once they venture out there, they need the support. And we went to government and said, look, we need to release preachers, people whose job is necessitated by virtue of two things: their conscience, religion, creed, but constitutional rights, which can only be limited if it's justifiable and reasonable, if there is a rationale behind it. Not arbitrarily, not cruelly, when no justification exists. Now, while we're looking at that, the Department of Education comes and says, no. Even children now, grade 12s and grade 7s, are prepared. They're prepared. They're prepared to go back to public life. Now you are saying even kids. Now, the rest of us are sitting inside, and there is a society out there with our church. What are you doing? Don't forget, this is not a state of emergency, it's a state of national disaster. Where the Minister of Education says of the students, I'm talking grade 7. Grade 7 is the old standard 5. We're talking about 12-year-olds. Are they saying a 12-year-old is more intelligent and more mature than preachers? That if you let them out into public life and you tell them, wear a mask, wash your hands, sanitize, maintain social distance. Are you saying a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old matric student are more sensible? They have better appreciation for the danger there is out there than churchmen? You're insulting us. We're saying to the Christians who are sitting out there, tomorrow we shall talk about what sectors of Christianity have done, which we see as selling out. You are saying, government is saying, a Christian under the banner of police work is sensible. A Christian under the banner of SNDF is sensible. A Christian under the banner of banker is sensible. A Christian has all their senses when they go to Bidvest. A Christian has all their senses when they go to apps or when they go to Checkers, when they go to Woolworths and they work there. But as soon as they step onto a church building, they are mindless brutes. Is that what they are saying to us? Are you saying to us, you can let matric students? I have not come across any school that has less than at least 150 matric students. You're saying you're going to let loose those 16-year-olds into public life for 7 hours a day, excluding traveling. If it makes it 9 hours a day, 45 hours a day. And the only place where they are unsafe is in the presence of their elderly Christian parents and preachers, in a group of 50 or 100, whatever number they are. There's no justification for that. There is no rationale in that. There is no fairness in that. There is no consistency in that. Considering that in government managed feeding schemes, where footage after footage after footage of crowds of more than 2,000, 3,000 standing shoulder to shoulder. the queues into supermarkets, the queues into pharmacies. No, they're safe. Even without social distance, even without masks, they're safe until a preacher shows up. That's an insult. The grannies sit the whole day out in the sun queuing for their salaries, for their pensions at Postnet. But not the grannies who are identified as a risk group. They are safe with no social distance, with all their underlying conditions, diabetes, COPDs, cardiac-related conditions, sugar diabetes. No, the greens are fine, as long as there is no pressure there. As soon as there is a pressure, even if it were half those grannies, no, they shall stay indoors. That is why we find some of the submissions made by government departments and sending out Christian groups, we found them disdainful. I mean, really. They're telling us that the grannies are unsafe to go to church. Let's say they are and they should stay home. What makes it safe for them to go to grocery shops to buy? Because there's no ban on grannies walking the streets. When government said people can jog, they never said which age group. I saw some old white men jog in my village, in my suburb in Joburg before I left. I saw them jog. They were jogging there. But now they're venturing out in public, and I don't know how feasible it is to jog with a mask. I never saw any of them wear masks. But no, they're unsafe when they come to church. What am I saying to sum up what I said today? Think again, church. This is the same government which a few years ago, up to a few months ago, some of them were pushing for the regulation of religion. This is the same government. And today you think they're happy to reintroduce church into public life. Is that what you think? You think they are ready to say, no, church people? One of the lousiest arguments that the government brought forth and some agencies brought forth were the infections in my home city, Bloemfontein, that no, we can't trust churches, you know. There was a church conference in Bloemfontein and people were infected there. But that's a lousy excuse. Because yesterday in the news, we heard that there was an infection in a KZN hospital. It was closed for a few days. Same in the news yesterday, there was an infection at Protea Magistrate Court. And it was fumigated and closed for a few days. So that means we don't need courts until lockdown is over. That means we don't need hospitals until lockdown is over. That's the lousiest excuse ever. No reasonable person thinks that way. That because, and don't forget that the closing of the Protea Magistrate Court in Soweto and the closing of the hospital in KZN was not the first anyway. And the closing of some shops, this camp was also closed because some staff member infected. Those closures and those infections take place within the context of a conscientized society. Takes place within the context that it is in an era where a national disaster has been declared and people have been given protocols, safety protocols, wear gloves, social distance, wear a mask, and sanitize. But the Bloemfontein infection took place in March before there was a declaration of the national, before South Africa declared COVID-19 a national pandemic. That's when the infections took place. But two, do not forget that it was 3 months after this virus was declared a global pandemic. That means basically the infections in the Bloemfontein Christian conference, the guilt for that lies flatly with the South African law enforcement agencies who let those tourists through customs in Johannesburg there without quarantining them for the mandatory 14 days according to the United Nations or the World Health Organization. Those excuses will never hold water anyway. The church must brace itself. We are petitioning right now. We are sending out letters right now. We are talking to various ministries. But if all else fails, the church is going to come to an Acts chapter 4 situation where Peter turned around and said to the government of the day, the high priest, he said, you decide if it's correct to listen to man or God. And maybe, just maybe, persecution would have started in South Africa. Let's meet tomorrow at 8. This is Brother Shimmy. May the Lord bless and keep you.